Hello, I'm Tanja K. Johnson,
I'm Alexander Christian.
I'm Ellen Bennett.
I'm Sylvester Barzy.
I'm Victoria Wilder.
and we are Voices of Color. And this episode is called Past Waves, Future Vibes. And we're going to be talking to you guys about some really, really great authors from the past, the present, and hopefully from the future that are going to make waves, that have made waves, and continue to in the writing industry. So, what are your guys' favorite authors from the past, authors of color that have really impacted you?
Well, when I was a teenager, my grandmother gave me a book, and it was like the first time I paid attention to the race of the author, and it was Toni Morrison's Beloved. And then I guess I got obsessed with her because of that beautiful book. If you haven't read it, you should. You know, she's been around since the 70s. Her words are so poetic and so beautiful, and I think she was one of the first authors that made me think like, oh yeah, like I'll write a book someday. Like that'll be really cool.
I was given W.B. Du Bois, The Souls of Black Folks. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings for my eighth birthday. And while it made me appreciate the craft of writing, it definitely made me get comfortable with my dictionary and thesaurus. It kind of gave me the glimpse of the future of how I would approach this because everything was so pro-black. And I was looking for the characters who were, just John up the street. And I there was this richness and this depth and this intelligence that was rare, not common. And I was wondering if the common story could be as impactful.
It was shocking that they would let us read this, but I remember in high school we were reading The Color Purple. And I remember that's of course, by Alice Walker, and there was a movie made by Steven Spielberg later on. But I remember and I read many books before then. Like that was the first book that I read that had a Black female character front and center. And it was such a complete exploration of what it meant like to be Black and female. There was an exploration of oppression by not only by white characters to Black characters, Black men to Black women, the ways that we oppressed each other. And it completely blew my mind and made me want to continue that sort of exploration of Black femininity. And that's something that's like recurring in my work. And so Alice Walker, she just really like inspired me. She was a game changer for me.
Yeah.
That movie disturbed me deeply. I was way too young when I watched it, and I know it starts off with some sexual abuse scenes, and that is one thing that was reoccurring in the whole movie. There was a lot of abuse, not just sexual. And I think as a child, I picked up those themes, and that's what really stuck out to me. But as I got older, I realized that the movie was so much more than just the abuse. It was overcoming the abuse and coming into yourself and realizing that you can cope, that even if you can't cope, you really don't have a choice because the world moves on without you. Like the mother, I can't remember what her name is. She came out of jail. She was trying to connect with them, but they were already like too far gone. They had forgotten about their lives were completely different, and she was still stuck in that moment in time, and she didn't really know how to cope, so she stayed there. So that movie, that book is about so much. It has a lot of really, really deep topics. I definitely would recommend it to any reader.
I'm not even gonna lie to y'all. Young Sylvester was not a reader. I was more into movies and stuff. So, like, a lot of my influences come from cinema. The biggest thing that impacts me and my writing career and my genre would definitely have to be Dwayne Jones's portrayal of Ben in Night of the Living Dead, because he was the star of that movie, mostly because Barbara was just kind of crying in the corner, but he held everything down, and he was just this strong Black man telling these people what they can't do, what they can do, fighting zombies, trying to survive. And that was in 1968. So that wasn't really seen in films too often. Things like that. But if I had to pick a writer, I guess I would pick Dr. Robin Means Coleman. She's the voice behind the horror noir book, which just turned into a documentary on Shudder, and it is amazing. But she's like this perfect little horror mind. I don't know. I wish I could meet her and just sit down with her. But she's a teacher at Texas A&M. She's just amazing. She's a professor in communications. I follow her on Twitter, and she talks about how she's discussing just different Black media or culture with her class, and just showing what's wrong here or what's right here. And it's just things like that stand out to me.
I gotta definitely go with very famous Maya Angelou. Before I was a novelist, I was very much a poet, and she inspired me and let me know that, a little Black girl, you can write, you can do what you want to do and make it, and people can read your stuff and love it. She has
still
this
a poet,
quote.
Kiki.
She has this quote that I just adore, and it goes, "I've learned that people will forget what you've said, but people will not forget how you made them feel." And that's like the shortened, paraphrase version of it. But that always really stuck out to me, because I want to make people feel something with my writing. I don't want you just to read it and forget about it. I want it to be a lasting stain upon your memory, that when you could think back, like, oh my God, I read that Tanja K. Johnson book and it's still there with me. It's like a ghost. And that's something that I really brought from Maya, that she taught me I can make people feel something.
Do you take aim at that? And I'll try to clarify that. So my entire story is a flashback. It's an old man looking back on his life. But I put in current entries as he's rereading it. So you get a sense of him looking back at his older self, and with his wisdom of age, judging his younger self. And on those pieces, it might be 700 words, and I'll spend 2 weeks on it. When I'll write a chapter in 2 days. When I get into that, I really get into the prose. I get into the imagery, the symmetry, the symbolism. Do you ever, take a shot at making something epic?
Definitely. Every time I sit down to write, I want it to be epic.
Wow.
I want it to impact you. I don't have.
That's right.
I don't have many scenes in my books where I'm just like, okay, well, this is just kind of like a throwaway. I don't know if that's what you're saying, but every time you read something, scene to scene, I want to be like, wow, there's a really beautiful gem in that scene that I can pluck out and think, oh, how can I recreate this? What is this emotion here that I'm feeling? What's this feeling lingering in between the words that she written? So yeah, I definitely aim for it. And it's like a bullseye. I hope I'm hitting the target.
Wowzers.
I don't think that much about it. Like, I wish mine could have that effect on people. And in my heart of hearts, I'm like, I hope this does make people feel things. But as I'm writing, for me, it's more like, I guess this is just the story that my brain wants to tell, and then I can go back and make more sense. But right now, this is just what has to come out. Otherwise, it'll just be in my head, and I won't go to sleep for 3 days.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I feel like I have like both aspects of it. Some stories I just want to pump out. I mean, every story that's in my head, I just wish I could just pump them all out.
Yeah.
But in the same aspect, I want it to be epic. I want it to be something that you like look back upon. Like the first book, well, not first book, but the one book that always stood out to me was The Outsiders.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I read that when I was in trouble in school. So I read that, and it was it just always stayed with me. So when I write, I want I want to know that one day I wrote something that some kid's just going to be like, oh, this is my favorite book.
Yeah.
This is what I love. Or just, and especially being a person of color, I want to make characters that kids can look at and be like, oh yeah, I could survive the zombie apocalypse just like Catherine. Or like,
I pick and choose my shots. I think that my chorus teacher told me, like, the Star Spangled Banner, for the land of the free, that note, you have to not do whatever it is you're going to do before that. You know what I mean? When you get to that part, it is a crescendo and it's a big moment. And you can't have a big moment before it, or at least, you know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? Like, you got to pick and choose the spots where you're going to shine. I think if I tried to make everything that way, I'd never finish a book.
Well, I think we're thinking about it in two different aspects. I feel like you're thinking about it as in, like, we'll sit down and we're finessing the prose and we're making sure that there's these key moments that touch the readers, and I'm just sitting down trying to put out a badass book. That's just what I want.
Yeah. Well, clearly we want to write a good book, but I mean, like, when you think about a movie like The Kingsman, right? The church scene is the scene. That's, you know what I mean? That's the thing. Frankly, my dear, don't give a damn. There's a moment, and I wonder if you just write and that moment happens, or if you pick that moment and make that moment.
I feel like, well, with me, I'm not going to speak for everybody, but I feel like everyone, well, I feel like I sit down and whatever concept I have for a story, there are key moments in my head that I feel like I have to hit in that story. Like, I know for the most part how my story is going to end, and I am just writing to get to that moment. So I guess just like with The Kingsman, I've never seen that movie, but with The Kingsman, that moment was probably something that was thought about. Like, yeah, amazing things do just sometimes happen, but it gotta come from somewhere.
Right. I think often it's about, like, picking out those moments and then figuring out what happens in between.
Yeah.
And just hoping it turns out well. I think I like the idea of ideas of, like I mentioned, Beloved earlier from Toni Morrison, and the idea of that is just, it's really fantastical in a very dark way. There's like a ghost or a spirit, and then there's like all these, I don't even remember the details of the book, but I just remember it's made me feel very, very strong emotions, and like sad and scared and like hopeful, and I want to have emotions in my book that hopefully come across, and so whatever the words are, I have to use them to deliver that, but I'm not like aiming specifically at the end product being, I don't know, mind-blowing. I'm aiming at like after you finish reading my book, what kind of feelings did you experience going through that, and what kind of feelings do I want you to leave with? And I think a lot of the books I like did that, because like there's Octavia Butler's Kindred, same kind of deal where you don't really know what's happening. If you haven't read Kindred, it's about a woman who starts time traveling, and she goes back in time to a slave master's home, and it turns out this is one of her ancestors, and she keeps getting thrown back in time and back in, and she's down there for like a year or 2 years or an hour, and then in her time only a minute has passed, so she's like aging and being abused and scarred and like experiencing some really hard, disturbing things, and then she has to come back to the 1970s. You never find out why she's able to tap into that kind of time travel thing, why it's not a choice she's making, it's not something she's able to choose when it happens, but like it just, all of it works together to leave you with a feeling of discomfort, but like curiosity. Like you're really curious, you really start to love the characters, you start to feel things you don't want to feel, you start to like characters that you shouldn't like, and then you hate them, and then you like them, and then you hate them, and it's like you just go through a roller coaster of emotions. And I think books like that are kind of what spurred me on to want to write.
I'm kind of just like taking like the quiet moments and seeing what I can pull out of those moments. Like if there's desperation, if there's joy, if there's hope, like something that I hope comes across, that the character feels, that I hope that the reader feels as well.
So, what's the biggest thing that you've taken out of these authors that you aspire to be like?
The people I want to be like, just, I feel like they're doing things like besides their creative stuff. They're doing things to push the Black community forward and to just to help kids and youth see that there's other avenues, there's other things that you can do. I feel like I grew up in the projects in the Bronx, and I feel like it was placed upon us that the only things that was going to get us out was either sports or like music. And there's so much more that we can do. We can be pilots, we can be soldiers, we can be professors and teach a class about horror. Like, there's so much more we can do. And I feel like the people that inspire me with their writing or their creativity, like Jordan Peele, is those are who I want to be like. People that are just showing a whole nother face to the Black community.
I actually ran across Ta-Nehisi Coates when he started doing the Black Panther comic book. The second I started reading his words, I knew that he wasn't a comic writer. This is a man with 3 degrees. You know what I mean? He was a correspondent. He wrote for the Atlantic newspaper. He is a very serious writer. And what he brought to the comic books was, it wasn't about, release the girl, you cur, bang, pow, zoom. He didn't write it like it was a comic book. He wrote a story that was a story, and someone added pictures to the story, but he wrote a whole complete mature story. And it made me realize that there is a 13-year-old me out there somewhere who just picked up a comic book and developed an appreciation for literature without even realizing it. And that was the poetry for me. I write about elves and dragons, but I still, my characters have these debates on social issues, and I still want there to be a point. There's a purpose. There's thinking going on. It's not just mindless explosions and grotesque combat. There's a depth of character, and whoever you agree with at the beginning of the book, you should question by the end.
Which I think is very similar vibes, tones from everybody, is that you want something that's going to impact your readers and dig down into the truth of something, whatever that something is. You want that truth to be told. You want it to resonate, to sing, and for your readers to be left with that impression. I think we're out of time, guys. We are already over. Again, we love to talk. That's why we do this podcast. So thank you guys for listening. This has been Voices of Color. Bye.